Hi class and welcome to another online session. Today we will be learning the poem The Chance of Humming by Rumi. I have already shared the PDF version of the poem. In this session we will be analyzing the poem along with reading it. We'll begin by reading it and then we shall go on to analyze the poem. So let's start by discussing a little bit about our author Rumi. Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi was a 13th century Persian poet whose poems have attained cult status across the world. You must have heard of Rumi at some point in your life. Okay, he's a very, very famous poet, and even though he's not a contemporary, he was a 13th century Persian poet. His works have attained a cult status. Okay, we'll see why that is. His Masnavi is considered to be, Masnavi is his work, it is considered to be a magnum opus in the Persian language. Magnum opus means the most important work of either an author's career or of a literary period, or here it refers to, the magnum opus in the Persian language. So in the entire language, out of all the literature written, this is considered to be the most important of the most importance, all right? Rumi's poems are originally written mostly in Persian, but also occasionally in Turkish, Arabic, and Greek. So what we will be reading today will be a translated version of his poem. All right. Rumi was born either in Waqsa, located on the banks of the river Waksh, in the city of Balkh in present-day Afghanistan, to Persian-speaking parents. Okay, so because he lived such a long time ago, it is not clear. His details about his family and his life are not very clear. So one assumption is that he must have been born in present-day Afghanistan, and his parents must have been Persian-speaking parents. His father was a great influence on him, which is evident from his works. The Sufism of the Balkh region, a center of Persian culture of the period, also influenced him to a great extent during his formative years. Formative years means the years when he was growing up and forming his poetic talent as such. Okay, so what is Sufism? I'm sure you must have heard of it. When I say Sufism, you imagine those long gown clad, tall hat wearing men dancing in circles with a very, very beautiful music playing, right? So that is not all Sufism is. That is Sufi music, all right? But Sufism is actually a sort of mysticism. Now, what is mysticism? Mysticism is a sort of spiritual awakening or a spiritual consciousness where you become one with God. That is your entire aim. Okay, so like our religions, we practice our religions because we want to go to heaven and meet God. But in mysticism or in very, very spiritual religions, what happens is that it's not just meeting God, they want to become one with God. All right, so that is mysticism, and Sufism is a sort of Islamic mysticism. Okay. Yes, so he was influenced by all that because the place that he is supposed to have been lived in, or during his formative years, that person was a very, very center of the Sufism of the Balkh region during that period in time. Rumi's family fled westwards when the Mongols invaded Central Asia and came to settle in Konya, which is present-day Turkey. Okay, so it's believed when the Mongols attacked Afghanistan or Persia, they fled from there and they came to live in Turkey, where his father worked as a teacher. Rumi's writings were inspired by Persian poets Attar and Sanai. It is said that while migrating, Rumi, along with his father, had met Attar, one of the most famous Persian mystic poets of the period, and Attar presented him with a book. Okay, so during his travels, when he was traveling from from Afghanistan to Turkey, he is supposed to have met Attar, who is one of the famous Persian mystic poets. And Attar, on this meeting, he gifted Rumi with a book, and this book seems to have a very, very important, has been an important inspiration for Rumi's work, all right, for his later poetic ruminations. Rumi wrote spontaneous ghazals, okay, or Persian poems, which are usually about pain or loss. And for Rumi, knowledge was like a torchlight. Okay, so that is his idea of knowledge. For Rumi, that might come as a question. What is Rumi's idea of knowledge. Okay, so for Rumi, knowledge was like a torchlight helping to search the best within the soul. So what is knowledge for you? It is not so that you can achieve greatness. Knowledge for Rumi is like a torchlight. When you put on a torchlight, there is a bright beam of light that makes things clearer. So, okay, so Rumi does not want to use this torchlight to make things outside him clearer. For him, knowledge is needed to make, his inner life clearer to him, to have a look into his soul. Okay, so when he gets that torchlight of knowledge, he wants to look into himself and try to find the truths of his soul, or try to find the best version of himself within his soul. All right, that is his idea of knowledge. He says in Masnavi, which is his important work, that if words begin to flow from a source within, only then can one start flying with one's own wings. All right. So the moment when you start speaking, words flowing means speaking, right? Or writing, whatever is your means of expression. So the moment when these words start to come from within, not from your throat, not from your organs of speech, not from your brain, but from within yourself, from your soul, if the words start coming, then only then can you start flying with your own wings. Until then you are on borrowed time. All right, so it is like you should have a sort of self realization. Only then will you start, having a very happy, fulfilled life, is what we can assume Rumi is trying to say here. Okay, so Rumi's poems are also known for their romantic and spiritual images and motives. All right, so all his poems, if you take a look at them, they have very romantic and spiritual images in them. And romantic, not in the romance lover sort of sense, romantic in the idealized sense, where the ideal kind of a life, happiness, joy in simple things, those kind of things are shown. All right, so that romantic and spiritual images and motives. What are motives? Motives are these patterns, these repeated patterns or themes or ideas that you find in an author's work. Okay, so those kind of things keep coming into his works. There are also ironical comparisons. That means comparisons that do not actually fit together. All right, in the previous class we talked about situational irony. All right, so here ironical comparison means it is not expected that you would compare these two things, but he does that in his work. All right, also there are some rhetorical questions. What are rhetorical questions? Questions that are asked not to get an answer. Suppose if I ask you, what is life? That is not something that any of us can answer. All right, it is a very, very philosophical questions. So those kind of philosophical questions that are asked in these poems and speeches when our ministers makes, all right, those are questions that do not need an answer as such, but they are asked for an effect of sort. Okay, so those are rhetorical questions. And there are many thought-provoking tales or stories that are there in his works which make us think. All right, so that is something about Rumi's works. And he also has very mystical views on life and afterlife, and the themes of love, faith, and time. Okay, very, very important themes in poetry also keep repeating in his works. All right, now without further ado, let's go and look at our poem and see what Rumi wants to tell us today. All right, let's read the poem once before we go into analyzing it. The Chance of Humming. A man standing on two logs in a river might do all right floating with the current while humming in the now. Though, if one log is tied to a camel, who is also heading south along the bank at the same pace, all could still be well with the world unless the camel thinks he forgot something and abruptly turns upstream. Then, oh, most minds do not live in the present and can stick to a reasonable plan. Most minds abruptly turn and undermine the chance of humming. A very, very short poem. Let's look at what the author means. Let's begin by talking about this particular word here, humming. Okay, when do you hum? What is humming? Moolipat. So when do you hum? Do you hum when you are very upset? Do you hum when you are, under a lot of tension? Never, right? You only hum when you are really, really happy or glad about something. Okay, you are at peace, and even when you are, so you unconsciously starts humming, because that is something that you do when you are happy. All right, so the title is giving us a little bit of confusion because he says the chance of humming. So when do you get a chance to hum is what Rumi will be telling us today. All right, now if you look at this poem, and I read it, I don't know if you noticed, but you can't really break this poem into, you know, very, very concrete paragraph distinctions. Rumi is, as we already discussed, a mystic poet. All right, and that's why I don't think he puts so much of a thought into the structuring of the poem as such. This entire poem runs like one single stream of thought that is coming through your mind. All right, and that's why it is not actually done by the poet, that he has broken it down into different stanzas as usually we see in the works of different poets. All right, since this is a very, very mystic poem, a spiritual poem, there are no paragraph distinctions or stanza distinctions as such. Okay, but for the ease of understanding the poem, we'll break it up into three parts. Okay, we'll break up into the three parts, and then we'll analyze them. Now the first part I'm going to break up here. All right, there's a full stop there, and I'm going to use that as my break. Let's read those lines once again. A man standing on two logs in a river might do all right floating with the current while humming in the now. All right, so we can understand the first part. A man is standing on two logs in a river. What are two logs? Tadi kashnangal. Okay, so in a river, a man is standing on two logs. All right, now why is he standing on two logs? Don't ask questions. These are rhetorical things. All right, so this is actually, and this entire poem is actually an allegory on life. Okay, what is an allegory? It is a symbolic representation of ideas. That means, you know, if you look at it in a very, very literal sense, you will wonder why a man is standing on two logs in a river. Okay, but that is not what the poem actually means. That is, you do not take it for the literal meaning. You have to interpret it in a different manner. All right, so a man is standing on two logs in a river, and he might do all right, he might be fine, as long as he is floating with the current while humming in the now. All right, so I have made a small diagram. Please do not judge my drawing skills. I'm very bad at drawing. Okay, so this is just an image of what I have drawn for you. So this is our man, and he's standing on two logs. Okay, and this is the river that is flowing. Now, as long as this man is going downstream, he's fine because the river is flowing downstream. So automatically when the river flows downstream, the logs will also flow according to that same rhythm, right? So as long as the man is going downstream on his logs of river, all might be fine. Okay, and because everything is fine, because he does not have to be worried about anything, he will have a chance to hum. All right, now he will have a chance to hum. Now there's one word that I want you to look at here. It is this word current. Okay, what does current mean? There are two ways in which we can interpret that word in this particular stanza. All right, first meaning is the current. That means the current or the flow of the river. All right, floating with the current on surface level, it means floating with in the same pattern as the river is going. That means if the river is going downstream, you are floating with the current downstream. What does it mean to go against the current? That means if something is going down and you are going up, that is against the current. Okay, so floating with the current means he's going downstream along with the flow of the river. So that is one meaning of the word current. Okay, which means the flow of the river. There is another word meaning, which means, what does current mean? This is the current status. What does it mean? It means present. Okay, present as in now. All right, so those are two meanings that we can understand. One is the flow of the river. If you go with the flow of the river, all will be fine. He might do all right. Okay. The second meaning is that if you are always in the present, if you are worried about the future, or if you are wondering about the past, you will not be all right. Okay, so the philosophy that the poet wants to give us through this particular work is to always remain in the present, and that is a very, very important philosophy even within Zen Buddhism. All right, where they believe in looking only at the present. Don't be worried about what has already happened. Don't be nostalgic about the past. do not have any fear or anxieties about the future. What is important is to remain in the present. And if you are living in the present, you will have no issues, you will have no problems, you will not have anything that is clouding your mind. And if that is not there, you will be happy and you will have a chance to